The Joe Rogan Experience.
But it's like USA is one of very few countries that competes clean. And so it's like, how do you compete, you know?
Yeah.
So he had this outside pressure to like produce an athlete, whether it was the right way or wrong way.
Isn't that fucked up, that statement that you just said? But I know it to be true. When you said the USA is one of the few countries that competes clean, it's actually true.
Oh,
and so strange.
I remember at the junior worlds that I competed at, the winning guy in my weight class snatched more than what I clean and jerked. Like this 18-year-old kid, and he like power snatched 155 kilos. It was
Where's
crazy.
he from?
I want to say he was like somewhere over in Europe, and I'm pretty sure it was like the whole podium got popped. It's kind of like, I remember like the 2008 Olympics, like the 94 kilo class, they started testing down, and it's like currently it's like 9th place guy has the bronze medal because they just kept testing down.
So did they pop him right after the competition, or did they pop him
I think it's
in
like
the future?
years later,
Yeah.
because it's like at the time with the drug, they don't know how to test for.
Right.
And so they save the samples, and then years later they figure out how to test for this stuff.
Did you see Icarus?
I watched like the first bit of it. Yeah, I haven't seen the whole thing yet.
It's fucking nuts.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
I mean, it's just crazy. Like, if there's a sport with money, people are going to start bringing drugs into it.
Well, the crazy thing about that was that it was a Russian state sponsored. They sponsored the
Yeah.
entire dope. They doped everyone. That guy, Gregory Rychenkov, yeah, the guy who is the supposed anti-doping guy from Russia. He said the only people they didn't dope were the figure skaters, because they found that the figure skating it actually interfered with fine motor skills.
Really?
Yeah.
So
made the women too manly.
So kind of funny about that. My parents were both figure skaters.
Whoa.
And so they're both Olympians, 1976. Like,
no shit.
Yeah, Paris freestyle. And my dad talks about like he would be in the locker room, and like different countries, he was like they just had their syringes on the bench.
Oh my god.
And he was like, you'd come in after your session on the ice, and he's like, the German team's just there, like they're not even hiding it because
it was legal.
It like
well, they
no
didn't
one,
test. For
yeah,
it
they
back
didn't know,
then, right?
You know.
But the American team did that too back then, supposedly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was reading this thing about Bruce Jenner where they were talking about all the shit that they gave him when he was winning the decathlon, and then they gave shit to apparently post when it was post the Eastern Europeans winning like a lot of weightlifting competitions, and then it was clear that they were experimenting with different kinds of steroids.
I remember reading the article, like they were testing it at York Barbell, and like I remember reading these journal entries from the lifters, and some they were bolting the bars like to the ground or to squat racks, and they would take the drugs and then just push on the bars as hard as they can, because their theory was like the heaviest bar you can lift is the one you cannot. And it was like, huh?
What?
And some of these lifters are saying like, yo, these pills or these injections are where everything is coming from. Like, this is where all my gains are coming from. And then others were like, no, it's the training methodology. Like, the drugs have nothing to do with it. I'm just hitting all these personal records. Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of both.
I think I know which one's helping out more.
For sure. But I mean, you don't just taking the drugs doesn't make you stronger. You have to actually lift the weights.
Yeah.
But for sure, the drugs are helping. Like the idea that the drugs don't help. I've actually seen someone argue that before. That steroids are useless, and if you train properly, they actually get in the way. I was like, what are you talking about?
No.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple people that, like in CrossFit, that got popped, and they're like, oh, the drugs weren't even doing anything. And it's like,
oh, silly boy. Of course they were.
Yeah.
They work. There's a reason why they're so prevalent, and there's a reason why they test for them.
Yeah.
They don't test for things that don't work. They're not testing you for Cheerios. They're testing you for shit that really works.
I mean, like the one guy that he was on the podium at the games and then got popped.
Oh.
I competed against him 6 or 8 months prior, and like the one stat, like he was snatching like 260 or 265, and then he shows up to the games and snatches like 290, and he almost hit 300, and he's like, no, the drugs had nothing to do with it. And it's like,
I bet they did.
Yeah, I don't believe that. And it's like you've been in the sport for years. Like, if you're just a beginner, you can make progress like that. But I'm like, you've been in the sport for years.
Yeah.
And then in the last 6 months, you just had this huge spike in your performance, and you're like, oh no, it's just because I became dedicated. It's like, I'm not buying it.
Dedication.
Yeah.
So important to be dedicated. Now, how often do they test everybody?
I mean, pretty often.
Do they show up randomly?
Yeah. So we have out of competition drug testing. It's like when I did weightlifting, we were on like the NAN program, so no advance notice. So you had to give, if you're in the Olympic sports, you're tested by the Olympic Association, you have to give 1 hour a day of where you are, and they show up. They don't call, nothing. So like everyone put from like 5 to 6 a.m., I'll be in my dorm room. And like if you're leaving for the airport at like 4:50, you'll see someone sitting outside the dorm room just like looking at their watch, waiting for 5 a.m. to hit and give the knock. And like they'll follow you. They come with you to school, work, doesn't matter what you're doing.
Will they make you miss a flight?
Yeah, probably. I'd assume they would. But I mean, like I remember having to talk to professors of like, I have an exam and like I didn't have to pee. So I'm like, you guys got to come to class with me. And having to like explain to a professor of like, hey, like these guys are here for drug testing. I compete in the sport. Is it okay if they just sit there? And
wow.
Yeah. So the CrossFit.
How creepy.
I mean, it's weird. Like I've had it before where they showed up at 5 a.m. I didn't have to pee. And I'm like, yo, it's 5 a.m. I'm going back to bed. And they're like, yep, we'll sit right here.
So they just sit in the room while you're sleeping?
Yeah. They just pull up a chair and they'll just sit there as
just
you
stare at you while you're
go
sleeping.
back to bed.
How can you sleep while this guy...
I mean, you just like put on the TV or something for them and like you just go back to bed. I mean, after a while, you get used to it. Of like the first time having to take a drug test in front of someone, it's weird. Like they're inspecting you.
They have to look
closely.
at your dick. Yeah, making sure it's not rubber.
And then, I mean, now it's like I don't even break conversation. It's like it happens so often. Every competition, out of competition, you get to know the guy that's like in your region for drug testing.
Did CrossFit always have drug testing?
I don't know. I don't know enough about the history. I think it's newer. But yeah, with the CrossFit drug testing, I remember the first time I got drug tested, because when I first got in the sport, I was like, I think these guys are doping. Like, I don't believe it. And I didn't know about the drug testing protocols. And then I had to sign up for it because I was doing well enough in the sport. And then I get a phone call of like, hey, this is so-and-so from the drug testing where your name got pulled. And I was honestly excited because I'm like, oh, sweet. They do regulate this. This is great. So I was like, yeah, I'm at the address that I listed. Come on in. Door's unlocked. And he's like, oh, no. We'll be there tomorrow. And I was like, what? I'm like, you're giving me a day's notice? I don't like that at all. Like,
you can flush your system out in a day, right?
I
For
have
a lot of things.
I have to assume that if you know what you're doing, you have a plan B. Like, you have to assume that you're going to get tested at some point, right?
How can they? I know that the USADA stopped allowing people to use IVs because one of the things they said about IVs is it allows you to flush your system out, and you can test negative.
See, I never knew the reasoning. I remember it was coming up. Like those IV bars that like they just jam pack it full of vitamins and whatever, like these super doses. And it's like started as like a hangover cure, right?
Right.
And I remember that was getting pitched, like other people around me were doing them and they're like, you should do this. And I'm like, all right, my livelihood depends on not breaking the rules. So I'm like, and I'm contacting people at CrossFit, like, hey, is this allowed? And it's like right there in the rule book of like no IVs over 50 milliliters or something. And it's equivalent to like a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons. So I was like, oh, okay, that's not allowed. Not doing that. But yeah, I mean.
So you can't even do IV vitamin trips? Interesting.
Nothing. Yeah.
But you can do some IVs. Like I said, no IVs allowed.
I think if it's a medical emergency.
So like if you're super dehydrated.
Yeah, so like if you're in trouble and like getting hospitalized or like there's a need for it, I think it's allowed.
Catch new episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience for free only on Spotify. Watch back catalog JRE videos on Spotify, including clips. Easily, seamlessly switch between video and audio experience. On Spotify, you can listen to the JRE in the background while using other apps and can download episodes to save on data cost, all for free. Spotify is absolutely free. You don't have to have a premium account to watch new JRE episodes. You just need to search for the JRE on your Spotify app. Go to Spotify now to get this full episode of the Joe Rogan Experience.